Hello and welcome to Datacasts. If you've been following along with my series of videos so far, then you will understand where we are at this point. We've written a whole bunch of code that allows us to read a film review on the Guardian's film review website and grab a bunch of data about that film review. Let's see how this works in practice. I'm just going to run all of the code in this particular script. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the single function that pulls the information we need from the film review, and that is this get review data function. And you can see if I scroll down to the bottom of the page that I've already got this URL that I've passed for the Three Musketeers film review. So when I run this particular function, I can just pass that straight in. So down here in the console, I'm going to type get underscore review underscore data, and then URL is equal to URL, which is the object that is storing the URL to the Three Musketeers film review. And then when I hit enter, you can see down here in the console that is returning the data that we want, the review title and the film title, the author and the star rating, and all the rest of the stuff that we looked at in previous videos. Now this is great, but I really want to take this a step further. And I actually began my previous video showing the end state for this, which is where we pass a single function that will pull film reviews across the Guardian film review website, across as many pages of film reviews as we would like. So how do we go about doing that? Well, if we think first of all about like a master function that triggers everything else, at this point, that kind of master or main function is get review data, but we don't want a single review. We want lots of reviews. So we're probably going to need a function that is something like get underscore reviews, right? Because this is going to pull all the reviews, and that's going to be a function. And really the only thing that's going to change here is the number of pages that we want to pull the reviews from. And by default, we're going to set that to 1. We're going to say that by default, we're going to pull reviews from the first page of reviews on the Guardian's film review website. Now, before we go any further, let's pause for a moment and think about what we're doing here. Let's go to the Guardian film review website, and I'm here on the first page, and I can see that there are multiple film reviews or links to different film reviews that are scattered across this page. In fact, there are 20 of them. There are links to 20 film reviews on this page. And if I click to go to page 2, then I get another 20 reviews, or rather links to another 20 film reviews. It follows the same pattern. If I go to page 3, it'll show the same thing. And you notice up here in the URL that we've got guardian.com/film+tone/reviews. And then question mark page equals 2. So this is a parameter that's being passed. The actual URL is this piece here. And then we can pass these sort of URL query parameters to change which page that we want to look at. So let's say I wanted to look at page 12. Then I could just type in 12 here, page equals 12. And now I'm looking at the film reviews that are listed on page 12. So there's a pattern here that we can leverage in our code. But we need to be careful, because what we don't want to do is allow a user of this code that we're writing to grab hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of film reviews all in one go, because that's not very polite, right? From sort of the Guardian's server's point of view, they're being hit by these get requests over and over and over again. And if we do that enough times, then it will look a bit like we're sort of spamming the website, like we're kind of performing some kind of denial of service attack, which is not good. We don't want to do that. We want to do this politely. And sure enough, there's an R package that helps us with this, which is called Polite. And you can see here that the goal of Polite is to promote responsible web etiquette. And it tells us that the package has two main functions, bow and scrape. Bow is used to introduce the client to the host and ask for permission to scrape by inquiring against the host's robots.txt file, while scrape is the main function for retrieving data from the remote server. Once the connection is established, there's no need to bow again. Rather, in order to adjust a scraping URL, the user can simply nod to the new path, which updates the session's URL, making sure that the new location can be negotiated against robots.txt. Okay, that's quite wordy, that's a lot to take in. What does this mean? It means that we begin by introducing ourselves to the Guardian website using the bow function. And then when we want to grab all the information from a page, we do that via the scrape function. However, if we move from one URL to another, so say that I am grabbing all of the information from the review for The Whisper of Silence, and then I'm going to move on to grab all the HTML content from Antidote, the Antidote review. You can see that up here in the URL, they have sort of unique URLs. They're different URLs that we're moving to, and that's something that we need to negotiate using the nod function. So we are bowing to the Guardian website to introduce ourselves, and then we are sort of nodding when we're moving from one URL to another. So we don't need to reintroduce ourselves. We're just sort of nodding and saying, okay, now I'm here and now I'm there. This will all hopefully begin to make sense as we begin to write the content that we want in the R script. So let's go back there. So we've got our get reviews, and so the first thing we need to do is introduce ourselves to the Guardian website through the bow function. And we're going to store that in an object which we will call session. So we're creating this session and we're going to call bow. And let's not forget to load the Polite library. I've already installed this package, so I'm not going to go ahead and install it, but you may need to install it yourselves, and then you can call that package with library, which allows me to call the bow function from that library. And what we're going to pass to this is the URL that we are going to call initially. This is sort of the main URL that we're going to cycle through to get all the other URLs to the reviews. And so if I go back here and we look at the URL, we can see that at the core of this is this piece right here. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that. So we're bowing to that URL. And for the time being, I'm also going to say force equals true as we're developing this code, because it means when we're rerunning this code, it's not going to use cached data. It's going to sort of re-establish that connection. But when you're using this code in production, you can ignore this force equals true. Okay, so that creates the session. So what do we do with that? Well, we know that we want to look at this page and grab all of the URLs to all of these other reviews on this page. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's create another function because there's going to be a bit of work involved here. So after creating the session, we're then going to create an object which we will call review underscore links, because we're going to get the links to all of the reviews. And we're going to create a new function called get URLs. So this is a function we'll create in a moment. We're going to pass the session to that. And the other thing that this function will need to know is how many pages of film review links will it need to scrape. So we're also going to need to pass pages, which is what we initially passed to the get reviews function. We're going to pass that on to the new get URLs function. Okay, so let's create that function. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do get underscore URLs, and that's a function. And that is going to accept session, and it's going to accept pages. Now, how is this going to work? Let's go back to the Polite website, and I'm going to just come down here a little bit, and I'm going to look at this extended example. It says that you can build your own functions that incorporate bow, scrape, and if required, nod. And what they're doing here is similar to us. You can see they're bowing to this cheese.com/alphabetical URL to create their session, and then they are creating an object here called responses, and then they're using map. So map, this actually comes from the purrr package, which is also part of the tidyverse, that allows you to iterate over something, and they're iterating over letters. So they're using this, I think, is a base R function, letters 1 to 3, which passes ABC. So if I just come back to Posit Cloud and down in the console, if I pass letters 1 to 3, so that'll grab the first 3 letters of the alphabet. So you see here ABC. So that's all that they're doing there. So they're taking that letters object and then they're passing it to the map function from the per package, which is in the tidyverse. They're iterating over each item there, so A, then B, then C, and passing each of them to the scrape function from Polite. And they are passing the session to scrape, which they created here. And then they're passing this query string. Now if I look up the help file for the scrape function, so you can see that the first argument is bow, which is the host introduction object. So that's the session that's being passed that they've created. Query is a named list of parameters to be appended to URL in the format list equals blah, blah, blah. So if we come back to our Guardian website, the query bit is here. It's the query string that is passed to the URL. We just have one, which is page equals a number, whichever review listing page that we're on. In their case, they have these two queries, per page and I. Per page, I think, limits the number of items that are displayed on this cheese.com/alphabetical site. And then I is the page itself. And I here is equal to .x. .x is what they passed as the first argument to map. This will make a bit more sense when we look at it in our context. Ultimately, what that does is it pulls down the HTML content from however many pages that they're actually looking at. And they can then pass that to another map. So now they're going to iterate over all of these different HTML pages. But this time they're going to use some functions from Arvest to grab what they need from each of those pages. And we're going to do something similar. They have a fairly complicated example here. I think ours is going to be a bit more straightforward than this. Okay, so let's come back to Posit Cloud. So back here in Posit Cloud, we're going to create a responses object. So we're going to follow a similar pattern to what we saw in that extended example on the Polite help page. And we're going to call map from the per package, which means that we also need to actually load in the per package. And again, I'm assuming that you've already gone ahead and installed this yourselves. Per with the three R's. So we're going to call map. And what is the thing that we're iterating over? Well, it's going to be the pages, because we're grabbing a list of URLs on each of the pages that lists all those different URLs. And then we're going to call the scrape function from the Polite package. You can see I've passed this little sort of this tilde squiggly line symbol. That means that we're going to be modifying the scrape function. We're going to sort of explicitly say which argument equates to what. Otherwise, if we just remove that and we just call scrape, it would just pass pages as the first argument to scrape, but we actually want to tell it where we want that, where the arguments are going to go. So the first argument is going to be the session, and then the second argument is query, and we know from looking at the help file that that accepts a list. And we're going to say our query string, well, that's going to be page, which is going to be equal to .x. .x in this case is pages. So it's calling the scrape function from Polite. It's passing the session that we created in get reviews and that we passed here. And then it's iterating over each of the pages that we've passed, which by default is 1, but the user could say 2, 3, 4, however many pages. And then it's returning to responses all the HTML content across those different pages. And these are the pages. So, it'll return all the HTML content from this page if we're doing page 12, and then this page if we were doing page 11, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now that we've got that, we need to map again, because we actually need to grab the URLs. So how do we get those URLs? Let's go back here. And I'm going to right click on this this part of the review link, and then I'm going to inspect to see if I can find a tag that we might be able to use. And we can see the link spans across both the image and the title. It's this whole kind of square, and that has a class which is equal to faux block link overlay. So we might be able to target that particular class and then grab the href, which has the URL itself that will take us to that particular review. So let's do that. So I'm going to copy the class. There's actually two names to the class. I'm just going to copy that piece there. I'm going to come back to Posit Cloud, and I think I'll store this in its own object called tags. And we know that we're going to need the class, and then we're going to need the attribute, the href. And actually in the previous video we created a function called getAttributes, which accepts tags, and the first one is the element and the second is the attribute. So the element in this case is the class, and then the attribute will be the href. So we can pass that. So tags is going to be a character vector, and we can paste in that ufo block link. And I think, did it have overlay as well? Yeah, you see I missed that. It's got underscore underscore overlay. So we want to make sure that we include that as well. Underscore underscore overlay. So that is the element, and then the attribute is href. So it's going to grab the href, which will actually get us the link that we want. Okay, so now we are going to use map again, but this time we're actually going to return the review URLs, which is the piece that we want here. So we're going to use map. What are we iterating over? We are iterating over the responses, that is the full HTML content for each page of film review links. And again, we're going to do this squiggly line to call the getAttributes function that we previously created. And we're iterating over responses. So if we look at getAttributes again, the first thing it expects is HTML content of a single page. But we may be iterating over HTML content for multiple pages. So that is sort of what we're iterating over. So that's going to be .x, because .x is equivalent to this, to responses. And then the second argument is tags, and that's like a static thing that's going to be passed each time, because it'll always be the same element and attribute that we are targeting. Now that's ultimately going to return a list, and within each list will be a character vector, and each item in the character vector will be a URL to an individual review. And each character vector maps back to a page of link reviews. So we need to kind of squish all of that together into a single character vector, rather than have a whole list of character vectors where each character vector is a page of links. And there's actually a function from Perl that does this for us, which is called reduce. So we can pipe this into reduce. And what are we reducing into? We're reducing into a character vector, or any kind of vector really, which is, so we pass C to say we're reducing into to C, which is a vector. And because actually that's a fairly short line, I might just bring that up onto the same line there. So at this point, we will have a single character vector where each item within that character vector is a link to a single film review. And that is the thing that we can return. So we can return review underscore URLs. So coming back up to get reviews, we've now got our review links. So instead of doing what we did down here where we pass a single URL, we have now generated as many URLs as the user would like, depending on how many page of reviews they want to grab. So where previously we were calling getReviewData and passing a single review, we can use the map function again from Perl to iterate over getReviewData for each URL that we've retrieved. So now we're going to create an object which we will call reviews underscore table, which is a data table of all the film reviews with the information we need. And we're going to map again. And what are we passing here? Well, we're going to pass the object that we just created, which is review links, which is the character vector with all of the different film review links. And we are going to pass that to get underscore review underscore data. And we're going to pass the session, and we're going to pass each of the film review links. And then the very last thing we'll do here is to return the reviews table, which will contain the data frame that we want. There is one adjustment we'll need to make to get review data, because we're not passing HTML content anymore, we're passing session. So there is a slight tweak we'll need to make to the beginning of that function. So if I come down to get review data, you see here it's expecting a URL, and then it uses the read underscore HTML function from rvest to read that. But that's not what we're doing anymore, because we're being polite. Everything is going through the polite package. So instead, this is where we use nod. Because we're passing a URL that's different to the one that we initiated within the session, we now need to nod to that new URL. So what we're going to do is we're going to create current session, and we are going to call the nod function from polite. We're going to pass in session, which we will need to add. So we will need to pass in session. So we're going to nod to that session. And if we come to the polite website and we go to reference and we look up the information about nod, you can see that it's bow is the session object, and then it also expects path, which is string value of path / URL to follow. So sort of what is the URL within the website that it's nodding to, and that actually comes through in URL. So where we call get review data up here, you see the second thing we pass is .x, which are that's the review link. So we're saying that that's the URL that we are now nodding to. So down here in get review data, we nod to the session, and then the path is going to be equal to URL. And we can be explicit there as well and say path equals URL. So now HTML content, we're not going to be using read underscore HTML URL anymore. We're going to use the scrape function from polite, and we're not going to scrape the URL, we're going to scrape the current session instead. And then everything else is fine because we've now scraped that. So HTML content gets used within the function and elsewhere, and that's all fine. So it's just a small modification we needed to make. Instead of reading this page using rvest, we're essentially reading it using polite, which ensures that we are being polite. So maybe let's just try out how this looks now. If I come down right to the bottom of the page where I've got this sort of static URL, I don't need that anymore. So I think I'm ready to run this code. I'm just going to restart R, and then I'm just going to have a quick look over things just to make sure that everything looks good here. I think, looking at it, I think maybe my tags here, I think I might have missed something because there's no A. If we come back and look at this again, yeah, so before we target the class name for the anchor tag, we need to actually say it is within the anchor tag. So I need to pass a dot all of that. So that's going to be a dot. I just spotted that. And then something else I've noticed that we need to think about is when we're calling reviews table, which is returning all of the data that we need ultimately. It's going to create a list of data frames where each data frame is just going to be the information for a single review. So we kind of need to bind all of that together. So we're going to pipe that into a function which is called list underscore bind. And the list rbind function, I think that comes from per from memory. So list underscore two colons, list underscore rbind. Yeah, that comes from the per package. If I just look up the help file for that, you can see here list underscore rbind combines elements into a data frame by row binding them together. So that's what we want to do there. So I'm going to make sure I save my file, and I think I might be good to go. So I'm just going to restart R. And then I'm going to run everything within the script itself just to load up all those different functions. Then I'm going to create an object called data, and I'm going to pass get underscore reviews without passing any arguments. And in theory, that should return a single data frame which contains data on all of the film reviews that are listed on the first page of the Guardian Film Review website. Let's try this and see what happens. We get an error because we have a typo. So list underscore bind, it's actually called list underscore rbind. And there's one last thing I noticed that we need to change here. Get data table is creating a column called review underscore URL to hold the URL for the review. And you can see that get data table, the output from that is piped into get date, and get date is looking for URL, not review URL. So we just need to update that to review underscore URL where it's referenced. So there, and there. And now we should in theory be good to go. So I'm just going to run all of the script. And now I can call my get underscore reviews function. And I shouldn't need to pass anything to this, but I'll save it to an object called data. And that should create a single data frame for all the reviews that are listed on the first page of the Guardian Film Review website. So fingers crossed, if I run this. Now I did actually speed up the video there, so that took a lot longer than it did for you. But that makes sense because we're using the Polite package. It's not doing things quickly. So if we come back again to the home page and we look at the 3 pillars of a Polite session are seeking permission, which we do with bow, taking slowly, which is why it took me so long, and never asking twice, which is why we use nod, so we're not reinitiating the session. So it did take quite a while, but you can see I do have this data object, and if I click on that, you can see that I've now got this data frame for all of the film reviews listed on the first page of the Guardian's film review website, and it looks pretty good. But one of the downsides of this approach is that because it took so long, if somebody else was using this functionality that we've created, then from their perspective, it looks like that something has gone wrong because they're not getting any feedback. So it might be quite helpful to provide some user feedback as we are politely scraping the Guardian Film Review website. So in the next video, I'll show you how to do that. We're going to use the CLI package to add some user messages. So I'll see you then.